Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. I hope all is well. Hope all is well. If you guys are watching us right now, I'm excited about tonight. I'm excited about this grand opportunity that we're able to come forward tonight to talk about some things about pain points in the marketplace and in the church. And I have a great friend of mine here. Nils Smith is in the house, and I'm excited about him tonight. So, if you are watching us live right now, if you do not mind, like this video and share this out to other family members, other friends, other brothers in Christ, sisters in Christ, and all family members. I believe tonight is going to be awesome, especially for church leaders and also marketplace leaders and entrepreneurs. So I'm truly excited. So guys, listen, we're going to open up. I'm going to allow myself to introduce Neil Smith here today. Neil, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about your history and your expertise, brother.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's so good to be with you, Pastor Rodney. So I'm based, of where I'm today is I'm based in New York City. I live in Brooklyn, New York. I'm a dad to two daughters, two teenage daughters. I say I've got a little youth group at home now. I've been married to my wife, Katie, for 21 years, and we're a part of Hillsong Church here in the city. But my journey really begins professionally. I say I'm an accidental pastor turned accidental entrepreneur. Um, and so I graduated college. I'll go back even further because I think this part of the journey I think connects the dots significantly. 1999, I got my first ministry job. I was 19 years old,
Wow.
and I was a youth minister at St. Mark's United Methodist Church in Baytown, Texas. And I had no idea what I was. I'd only been a Christian for like a year, and so I barely knew the Bible. But I knew that I wanted every teenager in Baytown, Texas, to hear the gospel. And if somebody was going to pay me to tell teenagers about Jesus, I was in. And so I remember we had our first youth group, and two kids showed up. And this seventh grade girl asked me a question that changed my life. She said, "What's your aim?" And I said, "My aim is to reach every teenager in Baytown, Texas, the gospel of Jesus." And she said, "No, what's your aim?" "Your AOL Instant Messenger." And that was social media back in the day. That I didn't know. This is like I barely had even been on the World Wide Web. Like we didn't have
Yeah.
a computer in our house or anything like that. But in the church, we had one computer at the secretary. That's when we had secretaries in the church at the secretary's desk that had the World Wide Web on it. And so I got on AIM and I set up an account and I connected with her and her friends. There's another junior boy in high school that was there too. He gave me his aim. And the next day, literally, and I broke all the rules. I stayed up chatting with teenagers till like 2 in the morning at the church offices, which you should not do, but there was no
Yeah.
rules around this back then. But I just wanted to tell teenagers about Jesus, and they were connecting with other teenagers. Well, next day I
Wow.
had a van, a 15-passenger van, which no 19-year-old should be given the keys to. But they gave me the keys to it.
Right.
And I filled up that van full of kids that I met on AIM that night before, and we went bowling. And I just built relationships. Built relationships where teenagers were, and shared Jesus with them. And that summer, I literally, we saw about a dozen kids accept Christ in that chat room on AIM, and another dozen in our actual youth group that all came from AIM. So I just did ministry
Wow.
online and in person,
Oh,
going to
wow.
where the teenagers said they were. So that put me on a trajectory of that's just how I knew to do ministry. I wasn't planning on doing online ministry or things like that. But then when I graduated college in 2002, I got a business degree,
Okay.
and I was going to just get a corporate job. And I remember the economy was down, and I remember having a conversation with my dad, and he said, "Do that youth ministry thing that you seem to like and you seem to be good at for a couple years. You're not going to make any money in this economy, and then you'll get a business. You'll get he called it a grown up job. You get a grown up job later."
Right. Right.
Um, and I jumped into youth ministry, and I just I loved it. It was incredible.
Wow.
And I had significant success. In those early
Wow.
days, it was MySpace then that came, and I
Yes.
was an early adopter into MySpace, and then Facebook came along. But I had in that process where I'd become an accidental pastor is I was good at it. I loved it. I liked it. I ended up going to seminary, and I was like, I'm going to be a pastor. Like that's my calling.
Yeah.
The truth is, as I look back, I was a mediocre, pastor, and youth pastor, but God was blessing, my ministry. And I was really, I think, more entrepreneurial in the way I
Wow.
did ministry leaning into unique opportunities. That led to me being invited by a church because I'd been pioneering so much of this
Yeah.
in young adults and in youth. Our young adult ministry had exploded to about 200 college students because I started running Facebook ads. The first day Facebook.com opened up advertising on their platform, I was like, I clicked that, run an ad button. And I was like, I spent $20. That $20 translated to 10 more college students at our weekly Bible study that we averaged about 12
Wow.
at. Because we doubled it for $20. So guess what? Next week, I spent $40. And guess what? We doubled again. And so because we were able to target every single college student in San Antonio, which is where I was at the time, through Facebook, where college students were. So at the end of the day, that got into the newspaper and got some buzz around San Antonio. So Community Bible Church in San Antonio, large mega church, said we want to we're thinking about launching an online church. One of our elders is in tech, and he thinks we can do something online. And you seem to know how this internet thing works and the social media thing works. So they said, would you consider becoming our social media pastor? And so I was like, that sounds cool. And so I jumped in. We ended up buying the domain onlinechurch.com because nobody else was doing it. It was heretical back then to do online church. And we leaned into this website that was for college students at the time, Facebook, that I was really good at. And I said, I think we should lean into Facebook and and try to build a church on the back of it, a church campus, as we referred to it at that time. And so we did it. And within weeks, we were averaging thousands of people from, all over the world. And it became the new front door, both for our local church. I think people were scared of, is this going to get people to stop going to church? We saw it only grow our church. And we began to take our local church global through the internet. And within a couple of years, we were averaging about 15,000 a week from 150 different countries and all 50 states. And it was amazing. God was moving in a significant way. What then happened where I became an accidental entrepreneur is one of the guest speakers at our church is a guy named Nick Vujicic. And if you've ever seen him, he has no arms and legs. And he was like, hey, I need help with this Facebook thing. And you know how social media works. Can you run my Facebook page for me? So I was like, Nick, you're just posting whoever is posting quotes on your page. He didn't have arms and legs. He wasn't posting it. And so I was like, I think we need to post pictures, like you don't have arms and legs. That's interesting. And so I started posting pictures and just going viral, on Facebook and then YouTube came up. Still so that ended up starting, so I ran his Facebook page and we expanded to YouTube and just had a lot of success. Well, other people started asking me, can you do this for me? Can you replicate what you did? So what became my side hustle as a pastor, because as you know, Pastor Rodney, as a pastor, you need a side hustle.
You need
sometimes to pay your bills. And so my side hustle just became, honestly, local businesses were asking me, can you help us with social media? Can you help? And the need was great and the success was clear. And so I started building an agency called Amplify Social Media, and it grew and developed and honestly kind of forced me out of ministry. And it didn't force me out of ministry, but it created an opportunity where I felt this moment where God was almost saying that, it's time to jump. And I was feeling this sense of, wait, God called me to be a pastor, not an entrepreneur. That's just helping pay my bills and doing some extra ministry. Well, then when I jumped, I would say what really ended up happening is God allowed me to use my greatest strengths most effectively and help more organizations, more ministries. So instead of it being a side hustle, it became my full focus. And I was able to then help, hundreds of ministries as a consultant and as as an agency owner. So we've been able to help hundreds of ministries through the years, lean into social media in particular. I mean, we build websites and do all the things but really be on the front edge of a lot of technologies. We primarily work with ministries. We've worked with some businesses as well, and tech startups. But then about a little over a year ago, an old friend of mine who was another entrepreneur who he actually started Right Now Media at a similar time. And he just said, hey man, you're the marketing guy. We need some marketing help. Can you help us. And I was like, yeah, I've got an agency. I'm a consultant. I can help you. And
Yeah.
he's like, no, we need you in-house. We need you really like driving our team and our systems, and our marketing is core to what we're trying to achieve. And
Wow.
so
Wow.
I at that time I was like, you know, maybe I can go bivocational, you know, in my
Right.
agency in this, kind of go bivocational backwards. And he, you know, within about a month and a half, we were like, this isn't a part-time gig. So I was able to, you know, it's interesting in my entrepreneurial journey. I was able to hire a CEO to take over my business, and then go full time with this
Wow.
organization. And so yeah, now I get to help raise up faith-driven entrepreneurs. And so I feel like I've got the coolest job in the world. And yeah,
Wow.
it's been a lot of fun.
Y'all listen. He has a history and a story, and he knows exactly what he's talking about, especially when it comes to the entrepreneurial side of ministry. And this is one of the reasons why we have him today, because I believe he has a wealth of knowledge and wisdom that's in you, brother. And listen, I am excited about it, man. And also, before I get started, listen,
Yeah.
for those who don't know what I am, my church, Reveal Church, has started a for-profit arm. It's called the Rodney Collective. The whole point of it is to get marketplace leaders and church leaders. We want to inspire change and ignite growth. And we believe by starting as a network, growing our base, coming together, bringing ideas, right, networking, having lunches together, having panels together, that would ignite change in the community. Because I believe a lot of times the church and the marketplace has a pain point that we cannot quite to kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together. And we're here tonight to help elaborate on that, to help kind of uncover, to dig in, to see how can the church and the marketplace come together for those who are actually have a desire for entrepreneurship, and those who are in church leadership, to see how can your church expand, not just in discipling, but in another form of discipling within your local community where you can have your greatest impact. So Neil, man, listen, I'm excited to have you, brother. Just for y'all who don't know, I met him at a 30 for 30 networking event with pastors and marketplace leaders here in the Atlanta area. It's called 30 for 30. I think they call it now leading
Yeah.
leaders collective. And I met him there. We kind of talked maybe momentarily. We didn't have deep conversation, but over time, I was watching him over social media, and I said, this guy knows what he's talking about, right? And what better person to come and watch and glean from, right? I'm learning as well as you guys. So he has a history of this. And what blew my mind about your story, Neil, is the fact that you started when Facebook had just begun. And it sounded like you took advantage of an opportunity, man, that many people didn't. And I believe that is also a pain point in the church. And
Yeah.
if I can segue there, what do you think is the pain point when it comes to church or either marketplace when it comes to social media?
Yeah, you know, I think it's fear. It's fear of the unknown.
Hmm.
I think at the end of the day, we all like our the known. You know, we it's you know it's scary swimming in new waters. It's scary like
Yeah,
moving to new places. We like our comfort zones.
yeah,
And at the end of the day, I mean, I just when I read the Bible, I don't read a whole lot of comfort zone stories. I read a lot about people stepping out of boats, you know,
yes,
and
yes,
taking some risks. And I think practically, it is very challenging, you know,
yeah.
as a pastor. And you know, I still remember one of the conversations I had as a social media pastor. A church member pulled me aside in the hallway and said, why are you supporting affairs in our church? And
Oh,
I was like,
wow.
supporting affairs in your church, in our church. What are you talking about? He's like, yeah, somebody in my small group, they rekindled a relationship with an old high school classmate on Facebook.
Wow.
And that's how people use social media. And so if we're gonna you'd be using social media so significantly, obviously we're supporting that. And it's like, no, people have used new technologies always for good and bad, you know.
Yeah.
And I think but I think we know stories that I think we're seeing
Mhm.
that today with AI, where it's not just, I mean, there's businesses that are scared of their business being disrupted. So it's not just churches that are scared, but there's also pastors, because it's unknown, of we don't know the cause of it. And the reality is I've got kids. I don't like my kids being on social media. Like, I get an angst with it, but I
Yeah.
also, you know, I'll tell you what I know. The average American spends an hour and 40 minutes a day on YouTube. that there's 100 million Americans that spend an hour a day on TikTok. There's 180 million that spend 25 minutes a day on Instagram. I know that there are a lot of people that we want to reach that are spending a
Yeah.
lot of time in these apps. I was just at the beginning. It was just college students, young adults. It was not the mass, audience that is today in social
Yeah.
media. And so I did catch an early wave in that space. I didn't know it was going to become what it has today, but it was. I mean, it's luckily I had a pastor who had a bold vision and freed me up as a young, pastor within the church to lean into these
Hmm.
technologies. He actually pushed me out of my
Wow.
comfort zone in a lot
Wow.
of ways, and we made a lot of mistakes. To be clear, I mean, I remember we 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 were like people wanted to do communion because we're doing communion at church. How do I do this? And
Yeah. Yeah.
it was messy. And we want to do baptisms. We did baptisms over Skype. We
Wow.
didn't know what to do. We were trying to figure things out at different times, and there were mistakes made. And when
Mm.
you're first, you're gonna hit hard walls. You're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna see things happen. And so I get the angst, and I think that's sometimes even that's the Holy Spirit like giving us
Yeah.
we should have a cause there. But I would say what the struggle what I always challenge pastors on is even if you're going to be opposed to social media, your people are on social media, and you need to
Mm.
be teaching. You need to know
Come
enough
on.
about social media to be able to teach them how to have
Yeah.
a healthy relationship with it. Because even like my kids, I gave them social media at a young, like whenever 14 years old
Yeah.
is kind of the starting date, because I want them to be using social media in my house. I monitor everything they do on social media.
Wow.
And I want them to have a healthy relationship with it. And the truth is, social media has allowed me to connect you and I to connect. Social media
Yes.
has allowed so many people to connect deep in relationships. So there's a lot of good that I see in it, but it's also, there's times where I stay too long on certain posts I shouldn't be looking at. Does that make sense? There's certain times where I think we all know that there's damage happening there, or we know people, that made bad choices on these apps, or
Yep.
we,
Mhm.
it gets nasty in the DMs, it gets nasty in the comments, and
Yeah.
there's tons of reasons to be cautious about social media. But I think there's hundreds of millions of reasons of people spending hours of time on these apps that tell me there's a gospel opportunity here as well.
It is, and I love that because there is a gospel opportunity. Um, I know we was talking before we went live, but
Yeah.
what part I didn't tell you about our church growth. Our church
Okay.
grew from one 30-second video of me and my wife, just greeting people and just saying, "Hey, someone loves you." Just that
Yeah.
simple. That one
That's
gesture
simple.
of love allowed almost 55 people to come into this ministry, and I tell many other churches that are hesitant about social media because
Yeah.
I remember when it came around, people said social media was the devil, and I'm like, "What's the
Yes.
devil? Like how
Yep.
is it the devil?" It only
Yep.
becomes that depending on how you use it, right?
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
but now we are using it to a space that is also allowing us to have church growth, and I
Yeah.
believe that is a target niche that many ministries are not taking advantage of. And even now, me in a small city of about 15,000 people in the
Mhm.
city of Villa Rica, Georgia, there are many small business moms and pops that are not taking advantage of social
Yes.
media. And one of
Yes.
the targets we're doing actually this Saturday, right? We're going to the local businesses, right, to let them
Yep.
know that we are here, right? As a
Yes.
church, but also as a marketplace leader, right? We want to be an
Yes.
engine for the community because many of them don't know that their businesses may not be growing at the rate that they desire. It's simply because they don't even
Yes.
use, they don't use uh, social media. So that leads me to say this, to ask you this, right? As a marketplace leader, or like a mom and pop's business that's probably been open 3 to 5 years, right?
Yep.
What
Yep.
what is one of the ways that you think that they can take advantage of the social media opportunity when they have no experience in it? Where can they start?
You look, I think bottom line is you just start. You just start. I think it can feel overwhelming. Yeah, one
Yep.
of the things I tell people is the place to start though is with yourself. It's social media.
Mm,
It's made to be person to person, and
yes.
people connect more with people than they do with the organization. So I
Yeah.
often tell this to pastors. People are going to connect with you, the pastor, more than they're going to connect with the church, the organization. It doesn't mean you shouldn't have a church account too. And
Okay.
we see plenty of pastors that are trying to become celebrities that's has an unhealthy relationship with it. But that said, I have a ton of friends who have leaned into that personal platform and
Yeah.
seen God do some just amazing things. And but you don't even have to post. I think at the end of the day, as a pastor, if you just get on and just comment on your church members' post, and then their friends are going to see your comments, and they're going to be encouraged by their pastor commenting on their post. Show up where your people are.
Yes.
Yeah, I often say too, is we often have had this like having ministry moments. We would either have to drive to go have lunch or go to an event or just see people on Sunday. Well, at the
Yeah.
end of the day, we can actually connect with our people every single day through social media. So just showing up personally is, I think, the best place to start in the comments without even talking. And then I
Mm,
think secondarily, beginning to find where is it that I can post? Where is it? What is it that I can say and share? And the reality is, before we do anything today, and I don't know that I don't get to choose our date night restaurants that my wife and I go to. She chooses all of them. But I tell you where she gets them all. She gets them from Instagram and TikTok. We don't go to a restaurant until she first sees something on TikTok or Instagram that says we should go to that restaurant. Before somebody goes to a church, they're likely going to see
yep.
it on social
Yep.
media or have had that connection. And so often a 30-second, sermon clip moves to a full sermon online, which moves to a church visit. Rarely does somebody just drive by a church anymore and just show up. And
Right.
so it's a different pathway, and that's any business. Before anybody's going to go into your business, they're going to likely see your food, on Instagram, or they're going to see that somebody else posted, about it on social media. And so, yeah, I think the more you can just begin to be active in these spaces. And if you're not showing up there, people aren't going to show up where you are. People aren't going to
Right.
just come to you. I think this is one of those opportunities to go to them, and I think that translates business, church. I mean, it's anywhere. It's hard to identify a successful church, ministry, business that
Mm,
doesn't have a strong social media presence today. And so I,
mhm.
I think it's your front door for just about anything today.
No, that's good. And you know what? My wife is on here. I know she is. So your wife and my wife are very similar. She goes find the restaurants and send it to me and say, "Hey, can we go try this
Yep,
space?" I'm like,
that's
"All
it.
right, let's do
That's
it."
it.
But
Yep.
but as a segue to the first question that we already had planned is that from your vantage point, right? What is the core reason the church and the marketplace struggle to truly collaborate instead of operating in separate lanes?
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a number of reasons
Yeah.
that this happens, but I think it's so often how we position the two and how we
Hmm.
even relate to each other. And I think one is that we just found with Faith Driven Entrepreneur, and we're continuing to communicate, is a pastor and an entrepreneur are really not that different. They're very similar.
Mm,
You still got to meet payroll. You still carry a weight. You still,
come on.
you've got to
Yes.
market the church. You've got to, pay your bills. You got to, hire your team. You got to fire people sometimes.
They don't
There's a
like that in
nature.
church.
No, but I think there's a relation. There's
Yeah.
an understanding that they actually have of each other. But there's also I think entrepreneurs sometimes are intimidated by pastors, and pastors are sometimes intimidated by entrepreneurs. The other side is, so what I think ends up happening is that pastors begin to treat entrepreneurs like ATM machines
Come
rather than
on.
missionaries. And,
Come
and so
on.
I think where I think the conversation needs to shift is, of course, your business leaders are going to be your biggest givers to your church. That's I think inevitable. But when you treat them like an ATM machine, they're not going to be as generous. But if you're just you don't need to just serve them just because they're going to be big givers. I think we serve them because they're actually their most influential missionaries in the community. They're the ones
Yes.
that have 50 employees, that they have 40 hours a week with those employees. You only get 1 or 2 hours a week with your people. They
Yeah.
get 40 hours a week that those people have to show up. They don't.
Yeah.
It's not optional to
That's
show up
good.
every other week if they feel like it. And so
Wow.
they are shepherding their people, and having influence on your community. They're bringing economic opportunity to your community. They're missionaries.
Wow.
And so I think we've got to flip the script in how we approach that dynamic and see business leaders in our communities as missionaries that we're empowering, that we're resourcing, that we're investing into. And I think as we do that, we're going to see exponential returns both in the kingdom impact in our communities. But then I think what you end up seeing as an overflow of that is, as they're more engaged and they're better served, they're also going to naturally be more generous, because as they're discipled and matured, generosity follows that. And I'll just add,
Wow.
I have yet to see a business leader integrate faith into their work and not have greater success in their business. And you don't do that. It's not like we're just going to pray and God's going to bless it.
Right.
But it's actually biblical principle. You just read Proverbs. I mean, every entrepreneur, even if they're not a Christian, I think could read Proverbs and grow their business just from reading
Yes.
Proverbs.
Yes.
The Bible has so much wisdom that applies to our work, and I think we've just missed that. And so yeah, so I think there's just a disconnect in how we relate to each other.
Wow. That is, man. You said a whole sermon, man. My God, you said that pastors tend to treat business owners like ATM machines. And I believe that is why many business owners, when they see pastors coming, they
Yeah.
initially want to run away, right? They want to separate. It's because
Yeah.
they have built this stigma that they're only there for the money. But they really need also, now on the other side of this, they also need a pastor to encourage them,
Yes.
because their
Yes.
business has ups and down seasons, and they need the
Yes.
faith base. And if we can be there by simply just being a lending hand, how can I help
Yes.
you? I think
Yes.
that will help the divide to become closer, instead of
Yeah.
having a mentality it's all about money and it's like this
Yes.
monetary exchange. Let's build a relationship before all of that comes.
Yes.
And naturally, if
Yes.
they even desire to want to, to bless a church, they will, right, without having the
Yes.
pressure to try to do so.
Yes.
Yeah,
And I think especially when it comes to senior pastors in particular and
right.
entrepreneurs, there's an understanding of each other, or maybe even church planters and entrepreneurs.
Yes.
But I think there's an understanding of the weight that's carried, because an
Mm,
entrepreneur, man, if they don't meet their bottom line and they got to lay off 10% of their people, and they've
yeah,
got 100 people, that's 10 people that are
that's
losing their jobs. That's devastating. That's a weight that's heavy to carry. I think people see the fruits of successful entrepreneurship and business, and a lot of I say a lot of people, but a few people that are highly successful. There are even more skeletons in the entrepreneur
yeah,
graveyard than there are champions in that
yeah,
space. Like, it's a heavy weight that entrepreneurs carry, which too, having worked in both business and in ministry, is there's a similar weight in ministry. You carry an additional weight in spiritual
yeah.
leadership and authority with your congregation, but I think there's a relatability that comes from the other. And so that entrepreneur, but here's I think where the real need is
Mm,
they're both very isolating. And this is where I think pastors get in trouble sometimes with
yeah,
sinful behaviors, because when we feel isolated and we get stressed and we get overwhelmed, we're like, nobody understands what we're going through.
yeah.
And entrepreneurs similarly, people just think they're at the top. Everything's great in their world, but people don't understand the weight, the sleepless nights, the heaviness.
Come on.
And it's and so I think there's a relatability to each other, that when pastors and entrepreneurs start having conversations and understand that weight together and share that weight together and honestly care for each other,
Yes.
it's a two-way relationship. And so I think when we switch that transactional relationship to a really deep partnership and
Yeah,
depth of relationship, it's
yeah.
really powerful what happens.
And I think And me personally, I think that's the route that many of us have to go. I don't think it's a need. I
Yeah.
think it's a requirement now,
Yes.
especially with the economic state of our world,
Yes.
political state, right? Mental state, emotionally,
Yep.
people are driven to naturally now have a greater need. But
Yes.
how can the church in the marketplace bring that together, that we can make a impact, not just in your church but in the local community? Right now we
Yes.
have a movement that's happening, and that can
Yes.
become a cancer, and now it's going to other communities, and now we have a great movement that's taking place, and now the mindset of business and pastoralship now has become one, and now we can make
Yes.
a greater impact when we do that together. And that leads me to the next segue here. Point number two is that, what do you most often see the breakdown happen when faith and business intersect? What are the real pain points on both sides?
Yeah, it's and I think I think this is a historical problem that we've had in
Mm,
how we
okay.
communicate about business, and this is, I mean, I hear this in business a lot, or I've heard it too much, and I would say this from probably more my dad's generation, and I feel like we are seeing an inflection point where this is
Yeah.
changing, but the statement that it's just business, meaning I'm actually going to leave my integrity over
Yeah.
here, and I'm just gonna, it's just business, meaning it's bottom line
Yeah.
profitability. And at the end of the day, we're literally just talking about different tax statuses.
Mm,
It's never just business. It's a business exists to solve a problem. It just might have a for-profit tax status rather than a nonprofit tax status. And so a business exists to solve a problem, and that problem-solving system structure, whether that's services or products, then employs people, and that creates economic
mhm.
opportunity. And there's a snowball to what happens when you build a business, just like when you build a church. Like it solves a spiritual need and meets a need in a community and solves that problem of that gap of what people have. And so I think the divide that has happened, or the shift that's happening, is a
Yeah.
mindset that we separated our business life and our spiritual life. And we've actually said that that's okay. I think we've also made a mistake in even how we have communicated calling within the church. And this is getting into some theology,
Let's
that's
do it.
that could be debated. But in I grew up in I say grew up. I got saved later in life, but mostly in a Baptist church,
Hmm.
in Baptist tradition, and in the Baptist church, with teenagers, we would often say, when you give an invitation, we're going to say, if you want to come to Jesus, accept Christ, if you want to rededicate
Yeah.
your life, or if you want to make the ultimate calling and become a pastor, and we elevate pastoral ministry. That there, I
Yeah.
believe there is a calling into pastoral
Yes.
ministry, but I also think that what that communicates is, if you don't accept that calling, if you don't raise
Yeah.
your hand, to then go into pastoral
Hmm.
ministry, that you're kind of, like you're secondary Christian, and you're not. You're a missionary. I think our entrepreneurs and business leaders need to feel ordained as an entrepreneur and ordained as a business leader in the community. And as they do that, if they literally see, I'm going to not just lead my team at
Mm.
my office, I'm going to pastor my team. I'm going to care for them when they're hurting. I'm going to, with if somebody's struggling with, they had a car accident, and I'm gonna actually just pay their $500 deductible for them, because I know that will be a blessing to
Yeah.
them in this moment. But when we begin to shift that mindset, or even just, we're gonna lead with integrity.
Mm.
We're not gonna just say it's just business. It's not just business. It's purpose. It's
Yeah.
meaning.
Yeah.
And so I think we've got to shift just some of our thinking. And this is where I think the discipleship comes in. So I think when pastors and entrepreneurs begin to talk more and just begin to say, well, I'm to empower you now as a missionary in your work, that means you got to begin to think about, as you read the Bible, how does this apply not just to my home life? Because we'll talk about marriage, we'll talk about kids, we'll talk about
Yeah.
these things, but we'll often kind of leave work over here to the side. But we've got 40, 50 hours a week that we're spending doing something, that we're kind of taking Jesus out of. And boy, Jesus needs to
In it.
be even more so in that. And so I think we've got to really prioritize that there is we don't have a business life and a spiritual
Yeah.
life. We have a Jesus
But
life, and that integrates
But you know what?
everything.
It's good. That's a good point you referenced, because even in Baptist church, when people hear pastoralship, they automatically think you need to be head of a church or in someone's pulpit preaching.
Yes,
But
yes,
pastoralship
yeah,
is not always you shepherding an entire flock. It could be you having
yes,
a specific focus in the marketplace, to help develop
yes,
ministry leaders in the marketplace. It could be a focus
yep,
around, it could be around young adults ministries, marriage ministries. I mean, a number of things, right?
yep,
And I
yeah,
believe that now the church is finally understanding that that scope should not be so narrow, and that they're making it, and that they're
yes,
missing out on so much other advantages that are there that we didn't take advantage of prior. And I think
yes.
if we begin to kind of retrain people's mindset to unlearn, to relearn what ministry truly is, because
Yes.
if think about it, think about Solomon. King
Mhm.
Solomon, he was one of the wisest people in the world, but he did things in logistics,
Yep.
international trade. I mean, he was a epitome of an entrepreneur, and he got it
Yes.
done through his
Yes.
wisdom, and he knew how to develop others to do it for him too as well. And
Yes.
and and I think that's the part we got to focus in on. Do you have any enlightenment around like King Solomon and his strategies, or anything that he used?
I don't, directly, but I think you can look at it from
Yeah,
Solomon to
yeah,
David,
yeah,
to Paul,
yeah.
where boy, you look at that Paul and Barnabas relationship.
Yes.
And so I mean, I think that thread goes all the way through, the Old and New Testament. Boy, you think about Moses, look at
Yeah.
Noah, like you can go all the way back in the Old Testament. And well, I mean, you think about, I just think about Noah and the ark and what, God had called him to, the craziness of, to build the ark. And people making fun of him,
And he had to be skilled to do it. He had to be
and he had to
skilled.
be skilled to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't, and I know he didn't do it alone. And so he had to get people to do it with him.
Yes.
And so I think there's a thread all the way through. But I think that there's taking those kind of wisdom books in particular.
Hmm.
And there's so much there that can apply. And then I would say the other is is the I is the side of, the boy, I mean, I think of this 23rd Psalm, how many
Yeah.
entrepreneurs just need
Yeah.
a deep breath,
Yeah.
because I don't think people enough know the weight that entrepreneurs carry,
Mm.
and it's a load, it really is, and the 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 pay stubs might look different, but,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
but 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 the stress, that comes with those pay stubs, I think is a weight of, that people really can't understand.
There was a friend of mine that I had some time back, and he was um he was a pastor and an entrepreneur. So he had both
Yeah.
pastorship and he had a business. And for 5 years, he dealt with insomnia very bad. He didn't sleep for 5 years, and he made on
Mm.
average maybe got 5
Yeah.
hours of sleep at night. And
Yep.
even to this day, he still says, "I don't know how I made it." But it
Mm.
wasn't until I came into his life, and this is after like 60 days of prayer.
Yep.
But come to find out, something triggered him in his entrepreneurship career, that his business took like a 30% decrease in revenue. In
Yep.
turn, he had to let go about 20 employees.
Yep.
And from that day forward, there was a pain in his heart that blocked him from getting sleep, because he always worried that that may happen again.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and it wasn't until God revealed that to me. And I wasn't even in past. I was not at a pastor at this time. I was just serving in a church.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I spoke to him and I said, "Hey, it's a trauma that's there, that's causing you not to get your sleep at night." And
Yep.
as we start to unveil, and I start asking more questions, we found out that he had a fear because of all the pressure, all the pain.
Mm.
It was almost like he was still dealing with what is it called in the military, a some type of traumatic event that happened.
Like a PTSD.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
PTSD over loss. and
Yeah.
and the only way I got him to see clearly and to help him overcome over time was that loss was part of the process.
Mm.
And he never had a father in his life to tell him that every day would not be easy. Even though he was a
Yep.
pastor, even though he
Yep.
taught the word, but he didn't have revelation in that area because that was still triggering this trauma in his life that he was not
Yeah.
able to get healed from. And now in his career, the trauma was still there and was triggered by that one
Wow.
moment.
That's good. That's good. But I'll tell you a resource that I'd recommend to everyone that I think is the best business book ever created, even though it was written for pastors, is a book called Emotionally Healthy Leader by Pete Scazzaro. And it's a book that he wrote for pastors based on his, he's got a real popular book called Emotional Healthy Spirituality, also a great read. But Emotional Healthy Leader digs into it, and basically as a leader, we have to be emotionally healthy
Yep.
in how we lead our people, and I think how we lead our congregations, how we lead our businesses. And one of the things that he challenged, he's a mentor of mine here in
Okay.
New York, but he I'm a workaholic. I'll just go ahead and confess that I love what I do. I was a workaholic as a pastor. I've been a workaholic as an entrepreneur. But he just saw me, I think, in a time where I had just been grinding too hard, too long. And he was just like, you're not taking a Sabbath, are you?
Wow.
And I was like, I mean, I don't do calls on Saturday. He's like, you don't do calls? Like, what do you do? He's like, well, I do laundry and I do this and I catch up on emails, and I can't be off. The internet's always on,
Yeah.
and he's like, that's sinful. He
Wow.
just really like had some hard lines in how I began to do things, and then he began to dig into some other weighty things. One of the things for me that I had to deal with in my business is there were clients that I worked with that their mission, was not aligned to
Wow.
mine. And their transparently, their theology, what was it something I was comfortable with.
Right.
But I looked the other way. I was like, look, their client, like that's their business, not mine. My business,
Right.
like they just hired me. I'm doing a service for them. And
Mhm.
and Pete said, you actually you have a weapon here that can be used for good or bad. And just because you're not under the umbrella of a church or a ministry in your business doesn't mean you're not called to have the same depth of conviction. And so I
Mm.
mean, I literally we now
Wow.
have probably fired more clients than we've taken, than we've recruited or hired, however you want to look at that.
Right.
Because we've just decided, in that moment that we need to be more selective in
Yeah.
who we work with. And what I found is that when I made that decision, it took a hit on our bottom line, but my team was more energized. Those clients were my team couldn't stand doing it. They were turned off. I mean, some of them had confessed to me later they were considering leaving,
Oh wow.
because of it. And they, they did it because I asked them to do it. They didn't want to question me. So I think it goes across the board. And I think it takes that just spiritual and emotional maturity to like, how do I lead my business? How do I lead, and what God's called me to and put in my hands? How do I steward all of it? And so I think we just I think we got to filter everything through that filter, and it's a learning. I think
Wow.
it's something that we all, there's so many mistakes I made as a youth pastor, so many mistakes I made as a
Yeah.
pastor. I think there's so many learnings we gain, and so that book has been a game changer for me, just in how I emotionally lead myself, and be a good, healthy leader for the
Yeah.
teams that I lead,
Yeah.
but then also for the decisions I make that affect, our company and our clients and our team.
Wow. That is awesome because, unfortunately, a lot of leaders don't have that type of integrity. When your values
Yeah,
doesn't match anyone else's, they tend to reduce their values just for
yeah,
the whole purpose of compensation. But in
yeah,
reality, it is actually bigger than that. And I tend to notice that when people do that, that's a sign that they don't trust God in the way that they claim they do,
yes,
right?
yes,
And
yes,
and that's an awesome characteristic of you, man. That's impressive because a lot of
yeah.
people can't do
What
that.
No, and I think a lot of and I think this is a hard, like, especially when people come to Christ later
Yeah,
in life too, and they've
yeah,
done business a certain way. I mean, my dad was in sales, and he got saved later in life, or really,
wow,
got really engaged in his faith later in life. And the way he did sales, the way he recruited clients, he was not glorifying to God, and he had to, that it changed the way he had to do
yeah,
it. He actually he ended up he just ended up just retiring because he's like, I don't know any other way to do business,
right,
and I can't connect these two worlds
yeah,
anymore. And I think too, business leaders are often scared of it affecting their bottom line, and they're not wrong. I think there are times it will affect our bottom line,
yeah,
I genuinely believe it might temporarily affect our bottom line. But I think you just know, as a pastor, there are some people that leave your church that it is addition by subtraction, and there are times when we need to,
yeah,
prove, our what we do,
yep,
and the way we do things. And so I think that there's just some decisions I think we have to make, and we're scared to integrate.
yeah,
If I integrate my faith, there's gonna be a domino effect that's gonna really cause some problems, and there will be some dominoes. But I think those dominoes, the end of that trail of dominoes,
yeah,
is actually some really great fruit.
grapefruit.
And so but you got there's wisdom in how you
But
make some of those
I was always
transitions.
taught that some of the hardest decisions is typically the right decision to make.
That's right.
And
That's right.
and as a pastor, I believe that's outside of being a follower of Christ. But as a pastor, a fatherhood is not even that challenging. But as a pastor, is one of the hardest things I've done in this earth,
Yes.
because you're dealing with people, because it is people business, right? But
Yes.
also you have to do things that maybe people don't see the bigger picture, and it
Yep.
comes off as you've been a negative person, but in reality is you're making a decision that's for the greater good for the entire body, right?
Yep.
And at the end of the day, I think that's the mindset as a pastoral leader, and also as a business owner, which I'm seeing a separation in that you got to make sometimes. And you're absolutely right. Sometimes subtraction is addition. And everyone that we
Yep.
lost, we've added. Literally, God has given us between 7 to 10 more within the next week,
Yep.
and
Yep.
and that shows that if you trust in Him, right, God will
Yes.
open up doors, man, and give you opportunities, and to show you that this entire time He's with you. And I think that's a crucial pain point in leaders that we typically don't live by, is because when we subtract, we automatically think we're losing, but in reality, you're really
Yes.
gaining if you are following the footsteps of God. And
Yeah.
and this is a segue to the last question before we open up for Q&A for those who are watching. Are you guys enjoying this? Those who are watching, that's in the comments. I see a number of you guys on YouTube and Facebook as well. Are you guys enjoying this live stream? Put in the comments for me if you are. And as they're writing that, let's go to the next question, the last question. And the question is this: it is, what does it practically look like when the church and marketplace are truly aligned? What changes in the life of an entrepreneur and in the impact of the church?
Yeah. Everything. Everything changes. I think at the end of the day, it's, I think it really is. I mean, it changes the game, and how you're investing in your community. I think you're
Mhm.
moving and from more of a come and see to a go, and be, just the way you want your people to live. You're discipling people and
Yeah,
sending them out, and saying, "Go and make disciples," and then,
yeah,
bring them into this community. I think it changes too, as I think one of the other things that I encourage, almost every church to have, is a business leader circle, or some kind of gathering where business leaders are connecting, because at the end of the
yep,
day, it's a helpful way for them to learn and do business together, but really more so, they understand each other. There's a
yes,
dynamic of and they challenge each other, and they really push each other and encourage each other. And so I think it's one of those ways we move people away from doing separating their
mm,
business and their faith, to, like, let's actually integrate our business and faith in conversational relationships. I think there's a side where a pastor actually then, I think one of the ways that we integrated, where instead when we moved from treating them like an ATM machine to being, start training them up as a
Yeah.
missionary and
Yeah.
investing into them,
Right.
is where I think they can. One of the things they don't often have is time to give, so they're probably not going to make your best, church volunteers. They might
Yeah.
greet or do, some different things, but they don't have a whole lot of time capacity. But where they do have time, they can bring a ton of insight. Whether if they have an accounting firm helping manage the church funds,
Yes.
effectively. I don't know a whole lot of pastors that are good at accounting,
Yeah.
but and it wasn't me. And so, but there's an accountant probably in your church, somebody that's good at that can help an hour a week, an hour a month, bring that strategic insight. That there might be a lawyer in your church. There are so many liability churches that get shut down because they
Yeah.
just didn't follow the right legal processes.
Yep.
There are entrepreneurs that have restaurants that can bring food, and use their business or cook it, something, an event that's
Yeah.
happening. There are so many things that or I think I love churches that do haircuts,
Yeah.
for the community. And you got a barbershop probably in your church, like, so you have these like, or oil, like I remember one of our churches, we had an oil change business, and we ended up with
Oh,
this
wow.
partnership where like every single mom in our church never paid for an oil change. We were able to he just gave us a bunch of, gift
Wow.
cards to give to single moms so that they could get free oil changes. That there's overlap between the two where honestly everything begins to change. And so I think it's not something that you can just flip a switch and like, okay, we're going to be a church for business leaders. But I think it's an intentionality where the business leader gets transformed. The business leader, begins to lead their business differently. They begin to impact the community differently. They begin to then have a greater impact that is now leading people into your church. And they're also probably giving more to your church,
Yeah.
and you have more resources to then do more ministry, which they get excited about investing into. A business leader thinks about their tithe differently than I think
Yes.
a lot of other people. They see it as an investment. Now they're also seeing it as a faithfulness of what God's calling them to, but they're
Yeah.
thinking about it a little bit differently. And so I think I think everything changes. And so I don't think this is like a little hobby ministry for
Yeah.
churches, that you kind of do on the side. I think it's a critical ministry that I think a church plant should be starting on day one,
Yep.
and really creating that circle of the business leaders in their church body. And I think if I were to say, pastors, here's the one area, like typically I'm like, senior pastors, you should not get involved in everything. Let other people lead. But that's one
Yes.
area. But I'm like, senior pastors need to be engaged in that circle for not just the impact they're going to have on those business leaders, but the impact those business leaders are going to have on them. And so I think that's a really important, unique dynamic that develops. And
Yeah.
I think it's just essential. I think it's essential.
It's very essential, and it takes a pastor that has integrity and great
Yes.
humility
Yes.
to understand that that as a pastor, that doesn't mean you're greater and you're higher than the entrepreneur or the owner. That means that both of you have a place of responsibility, right? That
Yes.
that both have to steward people well, resources well, the community well, your integrity, your character, and I think if we can come to that commonality, I think we'll see a great opportunity, man, for us to have a greater impact. But so somebody said it is additional by subtraction drop. They love your quote, man. They love it. They love it.
Yeah.
I'm hey man, I am truly excited to even have this opportunity, because just with the hour we spent here today, I believe they got a lot of great insight. And as we continue to build this network out, it was funny that you mentioned it, that you believe every church should have some type of networking opportunity within the
Yeah.
church with the business leaders within the community. We're having our first one next month. We're
I
having a
love it.
breakfast, and we'll have a
I
little bit
love
of
it.
teaching on the panel, and we're just going to network and get to
Yep.
know each other with no agenda. This is just all relational,
Yep.
right? And
Yes.
I believe it's a great starting a great starting place for us all to do that. And this discussion is needed. And for those who are watching, we're going to spend these last 10 minutes opportunity for a Q&A. And then also the last 10 minutes for you, Nils, to just tell the
Yeah.
people, what do you do? Some of them may want some of your resources or your
Yeah.
services, or just even have a conversation about it.
Yeah. So I mentioned Faith Driven Entrepreneur. We actually have a number of brands and initiatives that we do. So we have a brand called Faith Driven Entrepreneur that is for entrepreneurs. Everything is free. People are always asking, like, what's the catch? We have some generous entrepreneurs that have seeded into this
Wow.
ministry, to where we don't need to raise. We're a nonprofit, and so we don't sell anything though. We literally just give free curriculum away. We at the end of the day, we say we're storytellers. And so what we have found is that what really leads to entrepreneurs integrating their faith into their work is when they hear stories of other entrepreneurs that have integrated faith into their work. So we tell those stories. So we've got tons of YouTube videos and content and podcasts and all of those things. We also have a brand for pastors called pastorsandentrepreneurs.org about how you can bring this into your church. Also, everything is free. So we just basically train you and how to do this and resource you with free curriculum and resources. And so that's what I get to do on an everyday basis of my job. My old agency, if you're interested in some marketing help, is amplifysocial.media. A great guy. He's actually bivocational that is leading that now, a guy named Matt Williams. And we got I think we've got about 25 employees there that are serving our clients and, building websites and running social media campaigns and, producing podcasts and all of that kind of stuff. So if you need help marketing side, they would love to help you. Just reach out to them on the website. And if you're interested in bringing faith to an entrepreneur or just starting a group, it's free. We do an annual conference as well that you can attend online. We have watch parties all over the country. Well, actually, I said all over the country, all over the world. I'll tell you, Pastor Rodney, one of the things that I'm most excited about, we're launching a new initiative. We just launched called solving.org.
Okay.
Where one of the things we have found is we start with faith-driven entrepreneur. What happens after you're an entrepreneur is you become an investor in other entrepreneurs. And so we launched a community called Faith-Driven Investor of helping investors align their faith to their investments and really investing into faith-driven entrepreneurs and investing into things that impact. I think the way we often look at our money from an investment standpoint is we look at our money and our investments as we just wanted to bring the best return on it. Can I get 12% back?
Right.
Well, at the end of the day, if you can get 11% back, but 100% of it went to causes you really believe in, the majority of us just give it to BlackRock. Well, yeah. I bet we don't believe in half of what BlackRock is investing in. We'd be nauseous to know. But I think we can invest more wisely the resources God has given us and more thoughtfully. So we developed that initiative. And then we've launched into solving.org, which is a ministry called Solving the World's Greatest Problems. We are actually building collective giving funds. And so if you're passionate about human trafficking, if you're passionate about hunger, but one of the areas that we are seeing just incredible move of God is in Africa. Right now in Africa, it's the only growing population in the world, only continent with a growing population. 20% of the world's population is in Africa, but only half of 1% of all investment capital is funneling into Africa. And so you hear of a lot of philanthropic initiatives in Africa, but oftentimes what happens, and I've had the privilege of working with some pastors in Nigeria, and talking to them, is Nigeria, as I understand it, is about 70 to 80% Christian. They don't have an evangelism problem, but they don't know how they're going to eat dinner tonight. And at the end of the day, philanthropic giving runs dry. But if you teach them how to build a business, that creates economic opportunity in their society. So we are invested heavily into Africa as a country and seeing such incredible fruits. The church is exploding across the whole continent. But we're especially Western Africa. We're seeing just some incredible developments happening there. We're seeing some incredible entrepreneurs being raised up there. And so we see this whole basically faith-driven economy that is developing, and we're trying to connect entrepreneurs, investors, and philanthropists to kind of solve the world's greatest problems together. Because and we even bring that together because the core of what we do as entrepreneurs is solve problems. And so sometimes that's through a business, and sometimes that's through a nonprofit, and sometimes that's through a church. And so I think
Wow.
there are different entities, and at the end of the day, it's always problem solvers. A pastor is a problem solver, but an investor invests their capital into this thing. So, anyways, I love what I get to do, and
Wow.
would love for anybody to engage with us. But people always ask, like, what's the catch? We don't have a catch. Even the philanthropic giving, we don't ever touch the money. It goes directly into donor advised funds. It has a board that you can actually
Wow.
speak into where those funds go.
Wow.
But we want to help people collectively solve these problems together.
I would love to know more. We could do more of this offline, but the partnership with the faith-driven entrepreneur, about
Yeah.
your resources you have, especially as a partner with what we're trying to do, and I believe with the more collaborative effort, right, we can make more progress. So,
Yes.
yeah, I
Yes.
would love more.
There's
More details about this.
I'll tease that a little bit more.
Okay.
There's a website that we built, pastorsandentrepreneurs.org. We did
Okay.
a research study. You can get it right there on the website with Barna, that
Okay.
really studied. We went through with churches and what are they doing and seeing, and how do entrepreneurs and pastors, we kind of surveyed both, see each other, and it's really insightful. So I don't want to give too much away. Go and get that resource, but it's such a great starting point to even begin to process the unique opportunity and the unique gap that exists between the two. And I think the miss that's happening, what that research did for us is affirm what we perceived and what we were seeing. It was one of the things that really inspired me to go all in on this initiative.
Okay. Wow. Wow. That's awesome, brother. And I'm excited to for you to be here tonight. I'm grateful for what all you have. I don't see any questions at the moment. If you guys have any questions, drop it here as we close out with the last 8 minutes of this session here today. As your questions are coming in, I want to thank all of you guys for joining us tonight. This is our first session that we've ever done as a collective, and there's more to come. I'm excited about what's going to happen through these relationships, and with the insight and the wisdom for those who are coming on this platform. And someday, Neil, we're going to have a conference, man. We'll bring a lot of speakers in here,
Yeah.
and it would be an annual thing that we want to do, right? So I think this is going to, and I know this is going to be awesome, and definitely in this community, it's a huge need here.
Yes.
And we're working on a partnership now with the University of West Georgia, where we're going to be developing future entrepreneurs and leaders here. It's a local college that's got about 15 to 20,000 students. So I'm excited about that, man. We already have a small group there, so we're going to go and expound onto it. But do you guys have any questions? Any questions?
Can I preach about AI for a minute?
Absolutely, let's do it.
Because I think everybody's wondering about AI, and how do we approach AI? And so it's a question I get a lot, and I think that we're in an inflection point right now, just like we were with social media, and I experienced this back when churches were first getting websites of like, should we be on here? Because the number one reason people got on the internet was pornography initially. And so if you had a church website, you were being heretical. And then you got on social media, you were being heretical. And I think we have learned some lessons. And then if you weren't on the internet when the pandemic hit, you just got shut down. If you didn't have online donations, you didn't want to take online donations because you didn't want people doing credit cards with credit card debt. And then if you didn't have that set up, your church got shut down. And so I think those churches that got ahead had significant impact. That it doesn't mean they didn't make mistakes. It doesn't mean they didn't do something wrong. Now, I think we're in this similar world with AI where it's moving faster than ever. It's scarier than ever. As I'm 45 years old, I'm now hitting that point where I'm like, I think it's cool, but I'm scared. And I think though, this is one of those points where there's a unique business opportunity, there's unique ministry opportunity. But what I foresee though, probably most significantly here is we think about a kingdom impact opportunity is one. I think it's a cool tool that's going to do some things. I think it's also going to be one of the most devastating things, just like the tractor was. The number one job, in America for so many years was agriculture and farming, and then the tractor came along and it took a lot of jobs and people had to find other work where we had time. That was a slow fade. We're actually, this is going to be really fast that's happening with AI. And I think there's going to be a gap of people that lose their job and lose their perceived purpose when that job goes away, that I think we're going to need pastors, especially, to lean into this moment and be ready to care for their people and practically help them find new employment opportunities, new purpose opportunities. And so I think there's just a moment where we need to have eyes wide open into both the good and the bad of AI. I think I think there's some just incredible opportunities as we do that, but I think there's a social aspect of what's coming with AI that I think that as I look at from a ministry opportunity, it is going to be more significant than and it's just a very different, I think what happened. And I think there's things like people are dating AIs and there's some weird, stuff that's happening, and there's
Right.
social media, and I think even people thought it was weird when people started dating online. Now almost everybody finds their spouse online, and
Yeah.
so there's
Yeah.
things will become normalized that are weird today. I don't know where so much of that is going, but what I do know is it's all about to change, and society is going to change around us. And I think when that happens, there's kingdom opportunities and gospel opportunities for people that weren't open to the gospel before, all of a sudden are. And when we're ready to meet them in their need, not just with the gospel, I think when we meet them with some practical solutions for their perceived problem, when at the core their real problem is that they don't have Jesus, and so I think there's just a huge opportunity that I'd love to see business leaders, ministry leaders prioritizing in this moment rather than just freezing because they don't know what to do with this
Don't know what to
technology.
do. And that's, I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm working with the director of marketing now. She attended our church for the first time last Sunday at the University of West Georgia, and I'm
Yep.
working now to do an AI course, right?
Okay.
To
Yep.
help people become more innovative and understand that AI is here and it's not going anywhere,
Yeah.
right?
It's not going
Now I
anywhere.
do believe there's a certain level of usage we should use it, right? But
Yes.
it's going to be the future, and there's no way the church
Yeah.
should just shut it down. There's no way.
Nope.
We already have some AI procedures now through automations and workflows that we have in the church for our first time guest follow up, and everything, and new membership. So grateful to God, we have people here that are trained and have the experience with that, especially myself through all these 13 years I've been in corporate America. But it's not going anywhere, and you need it. And now, like you said, it's the prime opportunity to create other revenue streams for yourself, because every job we see today, I don't see 3 to 5 years, a lot won't be here, man. It would not.
No.
It would not.
No. The
And
world's going to look a
AI,
lot different in 3 to 5 years.
a lot different, and it's happening so fast.
Yes.
And now is the time to take advantage. It's kind of like what you was talking about in the beginning about Facebook. Take advantage of it once you get started, and we're back at that same place in life and time that you got to take advantage of it. So I'm all for it, brother. I love it, and we're going to do some great things. And I got some people that I'm partnered with locally and in my church that we're working on an AI tool for the Right and Righteous Collective. I believe it's going to be awesome, man. It's going to be dope.
I love it. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, it's going to be dope. And I'm definitely, before I release it, I would love to get your insight and stuff too, as well. So guys, listen, yes, our time is up, and y'all, this will not be the last time that you see him. I thank all of you guys for joining us on our first session. And this is an opportunity that I think many of us should take advantage of, these moments, to have the teaching, to have the insight that you may not get anywhere else. And this is one of the reasons why we want to inspire change and ignite growth, not just financially in your business, but also in your knowledge and your insight in this time and area when it comes to pastoralship and entrepreneurship. I hope that you guys got some pain points that we discussed tonight that you can take back to your own businesses, take back to your homes as you become more innovative, as you're thinking about your next move and next idea that you want to do in your business or in your ministry. So again, next month on the third Wednesday, we'll be right back here with a good friend of mine, Alex Williams. He's a pastor up in New York. He has some marketplace ministry ideas and also some experience as well. And I'm elated to have him on. Nils, hey, I want to say thank you again too as well, brother, and thank you for having you. And guys, listen, we're about to tune out. Again, third Wednesday next month. We'll see you guys again. We'll talk to you guys soon.